Plenty of other rackets. Why not this one? Is it because you don't like the idea of being inconvenienced a little?
Now, wait a minute. I never said anything.
You had everything your own way before, with the police department behind you and the station behind you and every honest citizen in town behind you. Now that you've got a toughing up, what are you going to do? Chicken out?
Why, you old goat, don't let anyone tell you you're not a salesman, because you're not. I just that's all.
Which means you'll do it.
Which means I'll do it, Pappy. But only under the condition that if I'm stoned out of town, you'll give me my job back when I bring you Mr. Big's ears. Well, I made the broadcast, and the storm protests began to come in almost at once. Studio phones were ringing before my 15 minutes were up. Carol Curtis was waiting for me when I got back to my office. This, I knew, was going to be the worst ordeal of all. I was glad it was first and would be over quickly.
Yes, that's right, Mary. Hold the calls until I let you...
Right, Ma'am Memphis. What are you holding calls for?
I want to talk to you.
Okay, go ahead and talk.
I heard the...
Naturally, it's one of the jobs you paid for.
What's behind it, Chuck?
Behind what?
You know what I'm talking about. You know what those telephone calls were about. You didn't mean any of those things you mentioned while you were on the air, did you?
Of course I meant them.
But, Chuck, it was red stuff. It was un-American.
Don't be silly. It depends how you look at it.
Well, at least half the city's looking at it the wrong way. Oh, golly, I'll be glad when it gets to be 11 o'clock. You can tell everybody you're kidding.
I wasn't kidding. Now, look, you get paid to be my secretary, not my critic. Get over to that typewriter and
Stop it, Chuck. I want to know the truth. Did you mean those things you said?
Yes, I meant them. A man's got a right to his own opinion, hasn't he?
Oh, not when it smells to high heaven of treason, he hasn't. Freedom of speech doesn't mean you can yell fire in a crowded theater.
Fire in a crowded theater, what a comparison. Look, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. Now get out of my hair and go back to work. What do you mean, no?
I mean that unless you give me some explanation of that broadcast, I'm through. I'm not going to work for a red bother.
Oh, you're not? Well, get... Oh. Hello, Pappy.
I've been outside listening to most of this conversation. I don't like it. Chuck, what's your answer?
Answer to what?
To Carol's request for an explanation of your broadcast.
She doesn't get it. Neither do you. I say what I please and no one tells me any differently. Then will you two scram so I can go to work on my 11 o'clock show?
Oh, so you think you're a pretty big man, do you? Say anything you please and no one tells you differently. Well, let me tell you something. There isn't going to be any 11 o'clock broadcast by Chuck Morgan. Not on KOP. You're fired.
Well, it was a pretty good act. All right. I don't believe I'll ever forget the expression of disbelief and horror and hurt on her face when I walked in. It gave me a queer feeling of hopelessness, as though I'd been convicted of a crime I hadn't committed and lost the respect and love of the one person who was most important in my life. Which, of course, was more or less true. But I didn't have much time to think about it right then. Even though only 10 minutes had elapsed since I'd finished that broadcast, there was a small and angry crowd gathered at the entrance of the fenced-in parking lot. They were waiting for me. The studio cop was holding them back.
Hurry up!
It was worse than I expected. It wasn't to be easy to take. I walked over to my car and got in. The crowd at the gate was getting bigger. Another arrived. I decided if I were going to get out of there with my whole hide, I'd better be now. I started for the gate, fast in second gear. The cops opened the hole and I headed for it. Into the headlights and I had to slow down. Someone pulled it back into the crowd, but I'd almost stopped. And something came sailing through the air. My car weren't equipped with unbreakable glass, and I would have been silly. It made me mad. I rammed on the brake, stopped within feet, got out. All right, you bums, come and get it. Oh, let go. That was a mistake. It taught me a lesson. They didn't come and get it. They came and got me. I was taken home in an ambulance and left nursing my wounds by a couple of unsympathetic interns. At 11 o'clock, I snapped on the radio. Pappy Mansfield came on what ordinarily would have been my last broadcast of the day with a special announcement.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is John Mansfield, president of KOP Broadcast. Company. I have an announcement to make that will interest you all. Charles Chuck Morgan was dismissed from his duties as a newscaster on this station early this evening. You know why. For those of you who don't, I'll tell you why. Charles Morgan is a communist. He admitted it early this evening. And this station will have no part of...
Happy sounded convincing. Too convincing. I began wondering if when the time came he'd be able to convince people I was a loyal American citizen and loved being one. That hopeless, not belonging feeling swept over me again. First, during the next few days, I hoped that Carol might phone, but she didn't. I tried calling a few of my friends, just to feel them out, and got a brush out in every case. But I didn't realize how seriously I was ostracized until I began looking for a job. That was the plan, for me to look for a job and get one if I could. I naturally started in on the other radio stations.
No use, Mr. Morgan. Mr. Adams told me if you showed up around here to have you thrown out.
You got a nerve coming around here, Morgan? Get out!
Are you nuts, Morgan? Think I want to lose every advertiser I have by hiring a red?
Now, wait a minute. Did you even talk to me? Well, that took care of the radio stations. Pappy should feel proud of the job he'd done on me. So next I went to work in the newspapers. This time I had to save myself a lot of humiliation by using the phone. The secretaries of the first two publishers I called gave me a fast brush. I expected the same from the third, the Los Angeles Weekly News Ledger. But I didn't get it. This was a surprise. The Ledger, a conservative weekly news magazine, was owned by a man named Travers Bullard. Bullard, a powerfully built, lantern-jawed man, had the reputation for fine principles and square dealings. When the secretary told him I was on the wire, he sent back word he'd like to have me come over for a talk. This was a sympathetic piece of dialogue I'd had in more than a week. It sounded so good I turned into an eager beaver. Got down to the Ledger office in less than an hour, cooled my heels in an outside waiting room for another hour, and then was ushered in to see Travers Bullard. Hello, Mr. Bullard.
Hello, Morgan. So you're looking for a job, are you?
Sure am. Not used to hanging around doing nothing. Not good for men.
No, that's right. Still feel the same way you did about things when you made that broadcast last week?
Now, look, Mr. Bullard, if you're going to hold that
Answer the question.
All right. I'll answer it. Yes, I feel the same way.
I thought you might. That's why I asked you to come down here.
Oh?
Yeah. I wanted to tell you, face, what a low-down, sneaking rat you are. I wanted to remind you that America is better off without dirty, stupid traitors like yourself. That I'm going to do everything in my power to see that you, and all like you, are thrown out on your ear. You're like so many others, Morgan. You take advantage of all the fine things that America has to offer. You come to accept these things as your rightful heritage, and it never occurs to you that it's your responsibility to help keep that heritage intact. Instead, you turn to some stinking, small-minded philosophy that isn't worth the powder to blow it. That's why I asked you down here, Morgan, to tell you what I thought and to do this.
Just for the record, I'd like to say that if you're an American citizen, enjoying the privileges that America has to offer, you're lucky. For the first time in my life, I was deprived of my heritage. And therefore, for the first time, I was knowing its real worth. Freedom of speech, freedom from fear, the sense of belonging, of knowing that I was a part of this great America, that what I said was important, that as an individual I was needed and wanted, and not a sheep that instinctively and blindly followed a leader. No, I was deprived of these blessings. I was on the outside looking in. I was the man without a country, hated, despised, rejected by the free society I loved. It was tough. I thought that if I ever got back my self-respect, I'd never again complain about anything that was American. One night, I was eating dinner in a joint down on Lower Vine Street.
May I sit down?
Oh, yeah, sure, but you better wait a minute. I want you to know who I am first. You might change your mind.
I know who you are. You're Chuck Morgan.
Yeah, that's right. Still want to sit down?
Of course. You look so lonesome and forlorn sitting here by yourself.
Well, I guess that about describes it. I am lonesome and forlorn. Have a drink?
No, thank you. This is unbelievable. You have no friends?
No. I'm poison to everybody I used to know.
Then perhaps you'd like to meet some new friends?
Yeah, sure. Now, look, don't waste your time, miss. I tell you...
Just call me Maria.
Okay, Maria. Don't waste your time. No one wants any part of me.
I think perhaps you are wrong.
Yeah? Well, then you don't read the papers.
Oh, yes. I read the papers every day and listen to the radio, too. Especially the news broadcasts on KOP.
Oh. I see.
Then, if you are sure that you do see, perhaps you would like to join me and some of my friends at a small gathering we are having.
When?
This evening. I'm sure you'll find many sympathetic people among those present.
Well, sounds like fun. Shall we go? We drove out to a small stucco house on a side street off Washington Boulevard in Culver City. There were half dozen people inside. Nice, ordinary-looking people. They all shook hands with me warmly. Nobody said anything about the broadcast that got me fired. In fact, nothing much of anything happened. Around 11 o'clock, the meeting broke up, and I drove Maria home. The next day, I met her for lunch. And 2 nights later, we attended another meeting. This time, it was at a house in Glendale. None of the same people were there. But this new bunch were just as friendly. One of them was a guy named George Zerba. And he gave me my first inkling of what the score was.
Nice bunch of people, don't you think, Mr. Morgan?
Call me Chuck. Yeah, they're swell.
How are things going with you?
Lousy.
Kind of tough getting a job when you don't happen to think along the lines of certain people, huh?
It's murder.
Need any dough?
Yeah, I could just a few bucks.
Here's 100. And don't worry about paying it back.
Well, thanks.
Forget it. Ever think of leaving L.A.?
Well, I may have to if I don't get a break pretty soon.
How about the East Coast?
It's okay.
There's a couple of radio stations there that could use a good newscaster with the right ideas.
Would they hire me, though? Every station in the country knows about me being fired.
It could be arranged.
I see. How about dough?
You could practically name your own figure, if you obeyed orders.
Who'd be giving the orders?
The big man himself.
When do I get to meet him?
Maria will let you know.
Well, this was it. Apparently, my indoctrination period was about over. Now I knew I'd been closely watched. I guess that my telephone lines had been tapped, and I congratulated myself on not having attempted to get in touch with Pappy or anyone else. I guess it was a genuine sense of loneliness that I'd felt that made my act pay off. Well, 3 nights later, Maria and I went to the Vine Street Derby for dinner. It's been a long time since I've eaten here.
In the East, you will be able to go many places and hold your head up.
Oh, you know about that?
I know about many things.
I'm waiting for the answer to one.
Yes. You will be home tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock?
Could be arranged. Someone going to call?
Perhaps.
Big man?
Let us speak of him as the leader. And by the way, you will be one of the few who know his identity.
Well, that must mean that the job he has for me must be pretty important.
Extremely so.
He must be plenty sure I'm the real thing.
The leader does not make mistakes. You have been carefully checked.
Good. I'll be glad to get started. Incidentally, do I know the leader? You know, I don't want to get too much of a shock.
He will be shocked.
Then I do know him, eh?
You know him very well.
Well, that's very interesting. Well, until tomorrow night, then, a toast to the leader and my new job. The next day was the longest I'd ever lived. It was hard to believe that the ordeal of the past few weeks was nearly over. That almost as soon as tomorrow I'd be able to sit in front of